Hello, everybody. Welcome to our last panel here at Renegade Con with myself, Trivia, and our wonderful storyteller for the nightlife, Deanna. And we are here to talk to you about antagonists in Vampire the Masquerade. Specifically, we're going to be touching on the Sabbat and Second Inquisition. Hello, Deanna. How are you?
Hello, I'm great. I'm super excited to talk vampires.
Yay! I've had a full day of cute ponies and robots,
Let's
and
destroy that.
let's
Let's just ruin all that good juju you got going on.
yeah, awesome. I'm ready to get down. It's dark out. It's the perfect time. I mean, it is here, in beautiful cold Minnesota. But yeah, let's get started. And so during this panel, I'm gonna have art up, both from Sabbat and new art from Second Inquisition that has never before been seen. So please enjoy. Um, and yeah, so let's start right off with Sabbat. So Deanna, you resident storyteller, I want to pick your brain as much as possible, especially after you've built this whole world for our Miami by Night chronicle. But what is like your favorite part about the Sabbat book, and what are you looking forward to including?
I mean, in general, the Sabbat are just such a wonderful addition to the deep lore and everything connected in the vampire universe. So what I love about them is that even though they are of the same plane, of the same monstrous determination as the Camarilla, as the Anarchs, they operate in such a completely different way, that a lot of times when you're putting together a storyline or trying to think of a good way to put conflict into your stories, you think humans are the enemy.
Right.
The masquerade breach is the enemy. You want to avoid that. Well, the dangers don't just end there. There are
Mm-hmm.
so many dangers within kindred kind that need to be addressed. And I think the Sabbat presents some really unique ways of adding that spice to your chronicle and completely destroying any semblance of stability that your coterie thought they had.
Yes. Yeah, like it feels like so much of vampire can be just like political,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, it's the
Sabbat don't do
anarchs. Oh,
political,
it's
not
some harpy in Elysium. And this is like, oh no, a blood sacrifice.
mass
What
embrace, pipe bombs, frenzies. You got it.
Yes, yeah. So it's like that really interesting injection of just chaos, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
they do not work the same way that
No, not in the
folks get
slightest.
used to. Yeah. Um like I also love how it talks about how, because the Sabbat has not traditionally cared that much about the masquerade, that they have dropped in number pretty significantly, right? So now maybe before, where there were these big groups where it felt almost like or it felt like another faction, like the Camarilla or the Anarch. Like you might be down to just this splinter cell, like in an abandoned, church basement or a warehouse, where there's like five guys that are still going for it. But they're very fervent.
Or there could be 100 groups of five guys, but
Yes.
they would never know about each other. um it's a really interesting dichotomy in family kind, to see them operate so sporadically.
Hmm. And I also like how so much of the like internal struggle or whatever of a kindred, right, is like, oh, I'm fighting the monster, like, oh, I don't want to be the beast, I have to hold on to my humanity, I have to hold on to my touchstones, like these are the things that keep me not a creature, while the Sabbat is just like, no, me and the beast are good,
Yeah,
like that's part of why I'm into this. And just like they're purposefully inhuman instead of trying to like fight that back.
there's specific paths within the Sabbat that specifically act on the, well, I'm damned, I'm gonna act like it.
Yeah.
I'm going to experience every horrible thing I possibly can. And that's very much that I'm here for a good time, not a long time mentality. That, were I not a millennia old vampire and were I instead a freshly embraced vampire, that's absolutely how I would handle the situation.
Yeah, like the vampires that are being brought in now, I think have that more urgent feeling behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like where, we're down to like 14th, 15th generation. Like if anyone adheres to any of the like Nodus texts and whatnot, that they're like, oh, we're at the end times. Like, why am I going to invest in a long-term strategy when, at any time now, the antediluvians are going to rise and kill us all anyway? Like, let's get this handled. So yeah, I love that you brought up the here for a good time, not a long time. That's a
I mean,
beautiful little nugget.
it feels very much like a vampire game of telephone, right? Because if you're an elder in Camarilla society, you've been taught those cardinal rules that they are law. You have to deal with them. If you were mass embraced and dumped in a grave, no one is taking the time to explain those things to you. So you might be a Sabbat with zero knowledge of what vampire society is supposed to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a fascinating addition to any world in which traditional kindred exist.
Yeah, and let's get to another slide real quick. So I want to show off all of this beautiful art. And yeah, so like with the traditional kindred and whatnot, right? Like I think so many people are playing, maybe a brand new embraced or a neonate vampire, right? Where, they are being brought up in the Anarchs and the Camarilla, and then like to see somebody that maybe was embraced at the same time that just like doesn't even have that amount of little bit of structure that they have gotten just because they've been afraid for their own life in the Camarilla or Anarch, is just so it's great to have those conflicts. That's not the right word, but reflection, there we go, of like a dark reflection of how it could have gone so very differently, just depending on how you were embraced. So you did bring up paths, of which there are plenty of paths of enlightenment in this book, the paths of enlightenment being sort of the different archetypes for Sabbat kindred, based on their own belief structure. So what is I'll talk about one of my favorites first. One of my favorites is the path of power and the inner voice. I love how like that is a Sabbat path that's just like, I have a strong force of will, I like organization, and I like discipline, but that's in the face of something that's so chaotic and so violent, that there is somebody who's like, no, I'm going to make like myself an oligarch in this situation or whatnot. So can you tell me what one of yours is?
Well, so the path of power is also my favorite, but for very different reasons. For me, it feels very much like taking an uncontrollable situation and finding the one piece of thread that you can actually reliably hang on to, and doing that. And as a person, that is very much how I function. So it was like, oh, okay, that tracks with me. But I also love the path of the Cathari, who are literally, we're damned, we're going to act like it. I'm going to experience every single thing that I possibly can while I'm here. I'm going to wreck shit. Is really the way that they operate. And I'm like, okay, you know what? If I were bringing new players into Vampire the Masquerade and we were doing it with a Sabbat pack, that's where I would plant them, because that's so easy. Like, you don't have to have that deep lore that I feel like scares away people from the world of darkness in general. You can just you're a vampire. You act like you're at one of Frost's parties in Blade and you've got it down. Like
And let's get to another slide, if you could, because this one is my second favorite, which is the path of the sun. So, like, thin bloods are a type of vampire that I'm very interested in. I need to create one so I can play it and then live out my little like punk fantasies. But I love that like these are thin bloods that are like embracing their quote unquote weakness of their blood, right? But the fact that it lets them actually be involved with daytime at all, right? Like they're scrappy, they don't care that their sun's scarred or whatnot. Like they're actually embracing this part of them that, especially in the Sabbat, right? That's it, they're almost like an abomination because they're a sign of the end times. But they're just like taking it and running with it because they're thin bloods. They're the new generation. Like they're what the next evolution of vampires might be. So I really like them. The other note being that like Sabbat often participate in diablerie, right? Where like they will go and gain power from the elders by drinking, like killing a vampire of a higher generation. And the Path of the Sun are like, absolutely not. We're not going to sully our blood with a stronger blood, which I just love.
That's the one part of the Path of the Sun that I can't get behind. I don't know if you guys
you want the
realize.
Power. You want the power.
I'm all here for a good diablerie. We ended season 1 of the Nightlife with 2 of them. So like I can just pass on that as a
all right. While you're burning in the sun, I guess maybe you'll reflect on your mistakes.
We'll see. We'll see.
And we can get another picture up here. I believe that this is one of the examples of a Path of Cathari. And Shovelheads. Yeah. So for those who may not know, Shovelhead is the not polite term, perhaps I'll say, of those like mass or surprise turnings, where
surprise, that makes it sound like a party.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Sometimes you just get bonked on the head.
Yeah.
And you wake up a vampire. Oh no, how embarrassing.
A dream.
Saturday nights, am I right, everybody? But yeah, like they just have no regard for lineage or what happens to the person after or anything like that. Like,
yeah,
just here to create some chaos. Oh yes, Mally says in chat, one of the best embrace stories, just crawling out of your own grave. Good morning, you're a vampire now. And yeah, the Sabbat are absolutely the type of vampires that would do that to you. So like, yeah, so speaking of like antagonists, right? Like just as a concept in vampire, like if you're a new storyteller, you're wanting to include the Sabbat, you're starting a new chronicle perhaps, this would be a really great way for everybody to do it. Everyone in the coterie wakes up in a mass
grave together.
Now what? What do you do?
Trauma bonding.
And then, what, like, there's so many hooks there that even as a new storyteller, you are able to pull from. You don't have to have the whole story written because the coterie isn't going to be expecting to know it all either, right? Like versus maybe a more traditional one where you walk up to Elysium and there's 50 vampires and you're like, oh no, which one are they going to talk to? I better make some backstories and some political connections real quick. It's like, no, you walk out of a mass grave, and then that gives you time to see what the coterie wants to do, what threads they pull on, to be like, do they want to find out who sired them? Do they even care? Because maybe they all have different discipline powers. Maybe that means they were all sired by different vampires in the first place.
What a great way to bring in new players.
Yeah.
Because again, you don't have to know who the Prince of the City is. You don't have to know the entire 30 plus years of lore. You can literally crawl out of your own grave and say, okay, this is where you're starting. And you can actually, that would be a fun way to build a character sheet with your coterie, because they aren't going to know what they're good at right away. Maybe they don't have a firm grasp on maybe they don't know that they can walk in the sun as a thin blood and not burst into flames. Like you could use that as the jumping off point for even a session 0, let alone a chronicle.
That's a super cool idea that I want to think about doing later. I've started a almost play by post Discord server with nobody in it, just as a thought experiment, and I think that would be a very cool way to start off one of the groups, where like maybe through prompting or whatever, that's how you figure out what your discipline powers are, or that's what you figure out what your bane is, right? Like as you're starting to solve those problems, to like see what somebody picks, and now they're figuring out, oh, I'm a Nosferatu or whatever, right? And then you start like, then since that takes time to actually take hold, right? Like then they can start the change and whatnot.
I mean, contextually, if I'm a human who was just embraced and abandoned, I don't know what a gangrel is.
Right.
I don't know what a tsamitsi is. I don't know what flesh crafting is, but I'm gonna find out. Like that's
hopefully at a really cool inopportune time. Yeah. So like talking about powers, right? In the Sabbat book, there is like a bunch of new discipline powers that are mostly used by the Sabbat, but I'm sure a savvy kindred could pick them up in some way or another. What are some of your favorites?
So I have a couple that I absolutely love. The first one was, and I pulled it up specifically so that I could read it, was the Reclamation of Vitae, which is exactly what it sounds like. You recall your Vitae. So that ghoul across town just all of a sudden starts shrieking mid-conversation, and Vitae pours from the corners of his eyes and makes its way back to you. Like, that's a terrifying concept to introduce into a game, especially to a bunch of like an anarch coterie who has no idea what that power is.
Right.
So for the sake of visuals, I really love the Reclamation of Vitae, but also the Befoul Vessel ceremony was really cool. Basically you turn a group feeding site into a frenzy with a simple, like, with one tainted kind being introduced to what would be a safe feeding ground. There's so much good stuff in there, and most of it would be absolutely horrific to a traditional coterie without the Sabbat ever having been included in a chronicle previously.
Yeah, like could we get the next slide just so we get another picture up here? Yeah, like the thought of, like, maybe the coterie has heard some whispers of something weird happen. They get snippets of, like, I don't know, bodies with runes carved into them, or like a whole party, like, and I mean like a college party or whatever, like, goes missing or whatnot. They're just trying to go and pull in those little threads. They're talking to a contact or whatever, and they just start bleeding from the eyes, right? And you're like, whoa,
what is happening?
And you can see where it's going, yeah. Right? Like down the sidewalk, like, that's in public all of a sudden, isn't it? That's really supernatural, isn't it? I love that. One of my favorites is the Mask of Isolation. So it's like the opposite, right, of a normal obfuscate power, where you're like, you don't know who I am, and so it flips it. No one knows who you are. So it's somebody who now is trying to, like, live their life, and, like, their friends don't recognize them, their work wouldn't recognize them, like, as far as anyone knows, that person is gone.
It's
and
sad.
Like,
it's
yeah,
ability.
he like,
I just want to hug whoever made that one up. Like, it's okay.
Yeah. So that seems like a very interesting thing to put on somebody who maybe gets too close to a situation, and maybe they were supposed to go do something really political or whatnot, and they try to show up to a place that they've been a billion times before,
and no one knows who they are,
and, like, yikes, won't believe you. Like, you can't, if you're like, I'm Jerry, and everyone's like, no, you're not. Like, what do you do? Oh, you're like, but I swear.
No, it's me. I'm him.
Yes. So I like that one a lot just because it's so like that's like a human nightmare. So of course it's a vampire
Oh
nightmare.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about it, so as a kindred, you're trying to hold on to those last, like, grasping at those straws of humanity. Um, this removes that possibility entirely. You know, even if you've been a kindred for 100 years, let's say, and your great granddaughter is one of your touchstones, there might be some just inherent recognition there, even though you might not actually know that person or have spoken to them. But with the Mask of Isolation, you are truly a stranger, and what was a comforting encounter becomes terrifying to that mortal and severs another tie to humanity.
Yes.
Which pushes you a little further towards the beast. It's good
Yes.
stuff.
Yes. We do have a question in chat that I think would be fun to talk about. What are some techniques? Let me tell and tell me if this is more suited to Second Inquisition for you, real quick. To highlight mechanics such as institutional conflict or the response algorithm. That sounds a little more Second Inquisition to
Second
me.
Inquisition to me.
So I'm putting a pin in it.
We'll get there, Lindsay.
Yes.
We'll get there.
So I promise we'll get there. And so going back to my notes. So, but I do want to ask you about conflict.
Yeah.
So what kind of conflict are you interested in building with Sabbat now that you've gotten it in your hands?
Yeah. All of it. So there's so much great stuff that you can bring in with Sabbat, but for me, it very much feels like, so right now we have the Second Inquisition all over the place. We've got the inherent, at times very subtle conflict between Anarch and Camarilla society.
Mm-hmm.
We have the mortal world in general, as a somewhat silent participant in just this uneasy tension that you live with as a vampire. And then the Sabbat, I feel like, are such a good catalyst to force action. Because I feel like very much with the Cams and the Anarchs, yes, there's a lot of clash there, but it feels very tactical,
Mm-hmm.
and like you said, very political. Whereas the Sabbat are very action driven. I don't know. It feels very much like you could just take years, decades, centuries of planning and screw it up in one night with the right Sabbat pack. And there's something so appealing about that to me. Not to mention the fact that if a Sabbat threat isn't dealt with, you're inherently risking the Second Inquisition and local law enforcement and a billion other repercussions. So I think they're really good at sort of forcing the hand for a coterie that's having a hard time making decisions.
Yeah. That's all,
but also
very,
all
very
the conflict
good.
And all the diablerie and all the bad stuff.
Yeah, and for those folks that like are running their games with Sabbat characters, like this can all be interesting, nuggets for what your players do in response to, the trappings of the ivory tower and what have you, right? Like where it's talking about like, this is what Sabbat's up to now. Like, are you in? Is that the same type of game that you want to play? And just giving you like those kinds of story hooks too, right? Instead of what are you fighting? Like, what are you being? So I do like that as well. And like I have never had that like vampire game where you go have that like high goth experience, right? Of like you find out that like you go to this abandoned cathedral or what have you,
like
right?
you
And yeah, like you do. And find like a cult ritual in the basement that's all this, and like that is kind of the thing that I want to introduce, where you've been playing vampire and you're like, yeah, this is like grungy urban blah blah blah, and then you like go into this place and it's like medieval, And
like you thought you were hardcore.
Yeah.
Joke's on you.
Yes. So it just introduces that like, oh no, like there is that like this turned into folklore element into this very like modern setting. So I enjoy this. And checking my notes real quick. Oh, and like just how do you clean up a possible masquerade breach of that caliber? Like, you know, the idea that maybe you men in black a few things, right? Like, oh, somebody bled from the eyes over here, oh, somebody exploded over here, versus like, no, like this city block is now an issue.
Yeah.
I like that very much. And somebody brought up in the chat about the Sabbat book being for storytellers, and yeah, the Sabbat book is pointed at storytellers, but there is also discipline powers and whatnot that aren't off limits to player characters. So we're going to be talking more about that big picture stuff in this panel. But like, if one of your players really wants to learn some of these rituals or whatnot, like there's
Give
no
them
reason they
Reclamation
couldn't.
Vitae. Do it.
Yeah.
Do it and see what happens.
Yes. And let's get another picture up here too, if we could, Katie. Thank you.
I feel like it's a valuable input to say that, you know, every game system is going to evolve with new information being released. I guarantee you that someone at your table is going to flip through this book and go, I want to do that. I guarantee you it's going to happen. And also, I highly recommend just playing, just maybe for a one shot or a two shot or a short run chronicle or something like that, an all Sabbat run. I did one recently and it was one of the best vampire experiences I've ever had, because it was just very much like, I want to do this thing, I'm going to go do it. I don't care about the repercussions. It was amazing.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes it's fun to play like the monster. Like that's why we're into the world of darkness, right? Like if you wanted to go play everybody that's all very good and whatnot, like the Empire is probably not the one for you. Yeah.
I know I'm coming off very loose cannon, but like do it. You'll have fun. I promise.
This is like you spent so much time necessarily in the world of darkness, like fighting the monster. Like, no, just go for it. Go for it for a few sessions.
Just let him win, just for a night.
So I also like the introduction of like a Sabbat turncoat that isn't, where you know you get to have that. Oh, this person's on. They want to stop, like they want to come out of this life or whatnot, right? But it's just used as another wedge to go and ruin some Camarilla shit or whatnot, right? Like, so I'm very into that power play getting turned back onto the coterie.
Well, and especially so with Sabbat and Second Inquisition kind of coming into the picture in reality, in truth, at the same time. Por qué no los dos? Why don't you use them both in the same? Have that turncoat be, you know, imprisoned somewhere and then re-released into society, and suddenly they're all about bringing down the institution, and they're feeding information back to that NSA agent. Like, there are so many great ways that you can just wreck everyone's plans.
Which is the fun of antagonists. Like, yes.
No one is ever going to want to play games with me after this panel. They're going to be like, you're just a little too much. Calm down, ma'am.
I think that's what people want out of a storyteller. Somebody's going to go mix it up. Like, I'll just go write a fan fiction or whatnot, right? If I just want everybody's time to work out well, like that's what the conflict is for. So.
I just feel like every chronicle I run now is going to end up with the Spider-Man pointing meme, and it's going to be like regular Kindred Society, Sabbat, Second Inquisition, and they're all just kind of going to be pointing at each other and trying to figure out who the real villain is. Like, that's what I'm picturing. Sorry in advance, Renegade games.
Another question from chat. So in terms of what kind of threats and terrors you can throw at your players, so in attacking and targeting humanity, what are ways where for the players to be emotionally prepared? So just I'm reading that as like that might be some session 0 type stuff to go over, where if you are planning on introducing some of like you want to go through the content, right? Like this is in the core book and there's a whole appendix in the core book on it. Just making sure that you're not introducing some content in a way that's gonna really mess with somebody out of game. Messing with each other in game is awesome. Messing with someone out of game on accident, there are a lot of tools to mitigate. So, if you're planning on bringing stuff into a game that's already existing, there's nothing wrong with having like session 0 part 2, where you kind of check
Do a touch
through
base. Yeah.
everything that you set out early. And if you have anything to add to that, Deanna, please.
I mean, it's funny. I just did a panel this morning about session zeros and touch bases and why they're so important. So especially in a horror RPG, it is important to do pulse checks regularly, because you might find triggers you didn't even know you had until it's presented to you on a silver platter. Especially if you're doing something like introducing a really large antagonist, like the Sabbat in general, or some government agency is literally hunting you. Or some hunters, I don't know, they might be around, who cares?
Yeah.
If you're introducing things like that into an existing world where the players have sort of felt it out and made themselves comfortable, you need to let them know that you're going to be disrupting that security that they have ahead of time. You need to be able to say, okay, guys, so out of character, I need you to know that things are about to change in a big way. If you have hard truths that you want to make sure don't change about this story, you need to tell me, so that you as the storyteller can kind of plan on incorporating some of those things back in. Now, you're a monster in this game, and as far as touchstones are concerned, they're up for grabs. That's just sort of the rule of the game. That's literally something we can use to take your humanity away. But I think it really all is going to come down to those safety tools, and then having trust with your table. Having trust is really, really important with something like this.
And I think there's also like if a player gives you a sort of hard limit, that there are ways to still like mess with them that don't hit that hard limit.
Yeah.
Like maybe they're like, I really need, like I have this touchstone. It's a family member, to my character, maybe however many generations removed, or I got turned. My mom thinks I'm dead, but she's still alive. And like, I need to know that nobody's going to kill my mom. Like, that's totally a valid, hard limit for a player to set. And you can break that touchstone in a variety of different ways.
Yeah. Maybe someone comes back into her life pretending to be you. Takes your place.
That's a good one.
Breaks her heart.
Like, I was thinking of something much different. That just got me a little bit. Oh no. I was just gonna go for like moves to a different state. Like I said, that's
no
pretty
one is gonna want to play with me after this.
Yeah. So like I know that sometimes if you haven't played with safety tools in the past, they can feel like restricting. But I think that in that out of necessity breeds invention, right? Where you get to come up with, I think, more creative solutions to solving these problems, right? Like it's very easy to be like, oh, your touchstone dies. Like, isn't it like
anticlimactic?
Won't it be a more interesting story to watch that relationship dissolve in real time through the player's own mistakes?
I knew I liked you. I just fell a little bit in love, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you. Yeah, so, I think that especially as long as you set the proper expectations, you shouldn't run into any explosive situations when it comes to hard lines being crossed.
Yeah. And like it also doesn't need to be a huge production, right? Where you can just like depending on your play style or whatnot, like even sending an email so people don't feel as in the moment about it can be super helpful. If you think anybody might not be as open to talking, sometimes that can be difficult. So I want to switch on over to Second Inquisition, if that's okay. And you guys can keep asking questions in the chat. Totally cool. But let's get into
Lensman was asking about my antagonist for season 2 of the Nightlife, and no, you have to show up and see what horrible things I do. That's the rule.
Good. Oh, I do like that. How did Deanna come up with that so fast? I think it's a gift, a special gift that you have.
It's a mess up here, guys.
Yeah, but I'm sure that it doesn't hurt that you're writing these stories for or not writing the story, but planning the chronicle for season 2 and everything. Like, I'm sure you're in a little bit of a headspace.
I think a lot about vampires right now. I think a lot about vampires.
Well, good. We're in a vampire panel, so perfect.
It's a good place to be. Happy to be here.
So yeah, let's switch on over to Second Inquisition source book, and we can go to the next piece of art. So, Sabbat's like another group of vampires. They have tons of lore, but they've become fractionated, and who knows what they're learning these days anyway. And then we also have the Second Inquisition, which does have their own lore and whatnot, but like in this edition they've expanded. Like, it's not just the society of Leopold and whatnot. Like, we're getting down to FBI, we're getting down to neighborhood policemen. Like, the Second Inquisition is so much bigger than like just a vampire hunting organization. So like I really like how it gives that organization that maybe seems invisible, like as a top level, to vampires when they're new. And if somebody's new at the world of darkness, right, where they've been pushed into this world where they're learning about the Camarilla, the Anarch, maybe the Sabbat or whatnot, and then like maybe however many sessions in, they hear about 2 havens next door or whatever being raided, and now there is a player on the chessboard that they were too busy wondering if they were going to get in trouble with the prince or whatnot, right? But just like, oh, something can happen during the day,
the human problems come to mind.
Yes.
I was skeptical. Admittedly, I was very skeptical about the Second Inquisition book until I got to look through it, and now I'm like all in. So yes, it's expanded beyond the society of Leopold, and you have these very militaristic operations and code terminology and stuff like that. But some of the archetypes that they give you for like Second Inquisition operations that can occur are just ludicrous, but they're like perfect because they're so subtle and so human. And I don't want to spoil anything because I'm going to go off about this later when we get to it, but it's versatile. It's so versatile as an inclusion in any chronicle.
Like, I like the thought about like, either somebody in your coterie or you introduce another kindred or whatnot that just will not get off Instagram. Like, that is their one thing that they hear it from the Camarilla, like, you have to get rid of that phone, and they're all like, it's fine, I put a VPN on it, and then they're just gone because they were completely able to get cased, right? And just like it ruins those little, like, we live in the world of 2022 and whatnot, and your vampires are also in this world of the internet,
where you can't hide.
Yes, you can't hide. And also, like, we've built so much of our world around the internet, right? Like, so you're not on TikTok, you're not on Facebook, you're not on any of these things if you want to stay subtle, and you're still trying to interact with mortals or humans enough that you're
able to find that super weird.
Yeah, like they drop a meme and you have no idea what it means.
Yeah.
And now you can't masquerade
That's
as
just
like
being
a
in your 30s. That has
23-year-old.
nothing
Yeah,
to
no.
do
Yeah.
with, yeah, that's
Yeah,
not.
you're embraced at 19 and people are doing a weird dance and you're like, me too, everybody. Like, because the other option is to possibly expose yourself. And like, what kind of paranoia does that breed? Wow, does that separate you just a little bit more from the life that you used to have? Interesting. You don't want to get firebombed in the night. Like, I guess I'll go delete my MySpace. But yeah,
Actually, you know, I feel like that's probably the safest online
yeah, I guess
profile
if you're
for maybe like Tinder. Tinder and MySpace are the two socially approved vampire apps.
yes. I want to look at questions real quick just so I don't lose them. We got a question about the Miami source bug, and I can't talk about that one yet, but I am hoping that there are some Deanna contributions. So we'll see. We'll give you more about that when we can. And let me see if there was another question. Oh, what clan are you, Deanna?
Okay, I want to do this differently. I want to guess what clan you are, and I want you to
Ooh.
guess what clan I am.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Ooh,
I have two answers.
I do too. I
Do you
think
want to
you're a
see if you
Ventrue
read
or
them both?
Toreador.
Interesting. I am very interested by your thoughts. So I took the quiz that they posted like last year that Paradox posted about what clan are you, and it gave me Tremere, and now nobody wants to be my friend anymore. And the and I actually really like the Sabisi. That is my favorite clan.
Okay,
So,
yeah, I don't want to be your friend anymore either.
See, both answers are bad. For you, I like I always want to say Toreador about everybody because they're just like they're so vampire TM. Like
yeah, absolutely.
But if I had to do a second choice, I feel like
my
you would
husband just
also...
screamed Bruja from the other room.
I
I
was
just want
gonna say
everyone to know.
I was gonna say Bruja if I did a like more enlightened guess, but
that's fair. Yeah, Bruja is very me, except that I have never been in a fight in my life. Never in my life have I been in a fight, but I would like to think that that's where I would land. Truthfully, I find Toreador super cheesy. I know that Cynthia is going to have my head for saying so. I just find like, move on.
Yeah,
you're dead. Can't you be something cooler? Like,
right, it's pretty. Next. Like, but I did watch like Interview with a Vampire on repeat, probably too young, so it's gonna just be lodged in there as a positive for me forever.
wonderful.
But okay, I got through the questions. So
I know those were disappointing answers, guys. I'm so sorry.
I do like that Mally said that you strike them as ministry.
Oh, that's the second time I've heard that this week. I don't know if I should take that as a compliment, but I will.
So getting back into Second Inquisition for a minute.
Yes, that's why we're here.
Yes. So the other thing that I like that Second Inquisition brings up is captured vampires and what being captured and tortured does to a vampire. So there are some good Samitsi creations that it seems like the Second Inquisition has been able to get a hold of. That seems bad. What if one of those gets unleashed into a haven? That seems bad. And just like humans playing the worst parts of vampires against themselves.
Mm-hmm. And I very much who's the monster in that case, right? Like who is actually terrorizing this neighborhood, this community, this group? It's
yeah
deep.
Like if the, like getting to that like government security level of surveillance affects vampires, but like that also affects mortals. Like
Well,
it's it
I
doesn't just have that laser sight
yeah.
on the undead.
All right, go back to bed now.
Yeah.
No, I like the idea of being hunted, right? Like
Yeah.
you're just a poor neonate. You got embraced 2 years ago. You're just trying to like figure out how to exist as not you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You're just around. You're not really hurting anyone too badly. And all of a sudden you're being hunted and you feel desperate and paranoid and panicky, all of which are extraordinarily human traits. So in a sick way, bringing the Second Inquisition into your chronicles is going to allow you to explore the humanity that your coterie, your kindred have left. Not in a good way, but they're definitely going to know what it means to be human and feel fear.
Yes. Yeah, which maybe they've been like kind of riding high on that for a while, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm a badass vampire. These are my ghouls. This is my coterie. We go to Elysium. We have the visitations with the prince, and then like
See, this is why I thought you were a Toreador.
yeah,
That
no.
that was too spot on.
I can put it on. I can put it on. Interview with a vampire. But you then like camera cut, media in res. I'm running for my life, like from a pack of whites with electroshock collars. Like who, maybe that's the next scene, right? Where like it can be a very humbling experience for a vampire to realize that though they are a predator, they are not the top of that food chain, just due to like human what's the word I'm thinking of? Resilience.
Mm-hmm.
and the one of the chapters in the book is called Mirror Mazes, where it really talks about like look at your own reflection, vampire. Like, what do you see? And I love that flips that script so well.
And there are so many like screwed up kindred society things that the book lets you use to abuse kindred society, frankly. Like they Second Inquisition operations will pre-blood bond spies before sending them out. And I don't know why that in and of itself is such like a horrific concept to me. But it very much like it takes this one thing that is like super kindred and it's like throwing it in their face.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very unsettling.
Or like
the Second Inquisition is the scariest book for V5 vampire.
Or like the blood dolls or cuckoos are right, like where this is a mortal who has found out that they don't blood bond. Like something in them just doesn't take, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they can infiltrate vampire society, play it up the whole time and be like, oh yes, you're my favorite, I'm totally your ghoul, you should take me to all your parties, and like go and get
Master,
all
can
that
I
intel.
please go to Elysium with you? I promise that I will behave.
Yes, and just like put that on so hard, and
Better than you or I just did,
right, yeah,
obviously. But yeah.
they would like act, and like just it ruins that thing of like a vampire being like that top
OP,
tier.
yeah.
Yes, like
Mm-hmm.
oh sorry, it didn't take, like, and now what? Like when you're used to having that free reign to talk in front of a human, right? Because of course they love you. And like I also like that it introduces some little snippets of like uh non-affiliated hunters, right? Like you get just your good old boys out to behead some vampires, and then also like people with true faith, which is probably very
A
terrifying
whole
the
other
first time.
mess.
Yes. Where like, oh, I met somebody who started saying Bible verses at me at Latin, and then they had a sword and it hurted real bad. Like, and having that be the experience of fighting a human, like when you like, they make me feel like I got in the sun now and I have to run away and hide and go think about what that means the next time that I
Does that
encounter a
mean that I'm
mortal.
allergic to the Bible? What is like what is the implication here?
Yeah, I've never had that problem before around
Yeah.
religion, and now it happened. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I just okay. So the big picture person inside of me is looking at the Second Inquisition, the Sabbat, and Hunter, which just got previewed, and going, how can I introduce all of these things into Miami at once?
And they're all crammed into the door.
And none of them are aware of the other.
Yes.
It's and you can create such delicious drama there too, right? Like especially with the freelance hunters and the true faith agents and that one guy at the NSA who knows exactly what he saw. Like you can take those different little cells of intrigue, and your coterie could pit them against one another, or maybe their ambitions align and they team up to create a weird little A team that comes after you. Like it can change your story in a million different ways.
Yeah.
Mostly for the worse, but like there's a lot of overlap that you can introduce, because you never just want to give them one problem to solve at a time.
Sounds like it sounds like you can make a little checklist that way.
B.D. Walters is like, if you can make things worse for them, just do it. It was the best advice he ever gave me.
The also the, like you said, like trying to pit them against each other, right? Like where they've gotten a hint that like, oh, the Second Inquisition exists. They've gotten a hint like, oh, these guys that don't care at all about the Masquerade exist. Like, can we as a coterie have problem A take care of problem B? And then you get cool questions like, hey, is that cool though? Like, is that
should
cool
you be
for
working with the hunters?
Yeah. Are you gonna really try to do that in a way that doesn't paint a target on your back later? Questions.
But again, think about the human condition here. Is humans are very prideful creatures. And to be able to be, and this is me imagining this scenario, to be able to be the hunter who said, yeah, well, I took down the oh my gosh, the competition, and then I went in and cleared out the nest. To be able to say that as a hunter, I feel like is like a big old gold star on your lapel.
Yeah.
I think it would be very easy for a vampire to convince a hunter that perhaps their goals in this one particular area align. And then eventually they turn on each other and there's a shootout of some kind, but like delicious.
Yes, there's a lot of fun intrigue there. And like a scary thing to hear as a player is your plan went off perfectly. Because that never happens. Like, wow, that super worked out for you, right? Like, especially maybe after you roll something, to see how well it went, right?
I mean, like, I love. Oh man, you just made me think about something big. So, like, as a vampire, your plan goes off perfectly. You and the true faith agents teamed up. And you took out the rogue hunter who was causing all kinds of problems. He was burning down buildings. Dude was just bad news. And then that true faith hunter turns around and says Latin at you. And you're like, words don't hurt me, sticks and stones, bro. And then they stab you with the knife, and suddenly you actually feel that pain, and you're like, wait, this conflicts with the knowledge that I have. And as an eternal being, ignorance like that is not like questioning your life, unlife.
Existence.
It is not, it's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're questioning what you're safe from, what you can do, what you can't do, then you're going to question the Camarilla. You're going
Why
to
didn't they
question
tell
why
you about
exist.
this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So
the
even if that plan goes off perfectly, it's still going to suck, basically.
Yes. The image that's up right now is of the deprogrammer, who is one of my most favorites from Second Inquisition. So this antagonist, a storyteller character, what have you, is actually available in the Second Inquisition preview that we have on Renegade. So if you haven't picked up this book and you want to read kind of what we're working with, please go download it for free off the Renegade website. And so like the whole vibe behind this storyteller character is that they break blood bonds. They break vampire will just in general, through a variety of different means. And
all wholesome, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, that deprogrammer looks really kind. And like they have a medical license.
She's
but
wearing gloves.
Step A, it's been complete. Wear gloves. But like I love the idea of like in that breaking what you know, right? Like maybe it's not even happening to the coterie. Like just having that like happen in the next zip code or something, right? Where like somebody's whole herd gets broken. And like what kind of like the having to second guess every connection that they might have had to that. Like were we friends on Facebook, or like did we go to the same parties? Like did they know my face?
They
like
were in my top 8 on MySpace.
Yes, they were on my top 8 on MySpace. What if, and then you kind of have the two options, right? Like do you hide or do you pretend you don't care?
Yeah.
Do you
Neither
try?
of which is good.
No. And like, so do you try to lay low? And if you lay low, like what kinds of desperate actions do you take to still get your needs fulfilled as a vampire? Like you don't want to go risk, like feeding off your herd. What if it happens to you next? You don't want to go into a like unknown place. Like, do they have surveillance? Like it ups that temperature so much. And maybe something doesn't happen for months, right? Like to let that vampire get back into their flow, and then it happens closer. Like, so building up that tension.
Well, and especially this could be happening, like you said, a neighborhood over, a couple of blocks over. And unless your players roll high enough on certain things, they might not know about it until it's way too late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or finding out about it like 2 weeks after it happened. And then now you're trying to scrub through the last things that you did.
To make sure that in the past 2 weeks you haven't interacted. Yeah. No, it's wonderful.
Yes. And if we could go one more picture over, this is one of my personal favorite pieces of art from the book, and it's talking about vampire turncoats. So this is a thin blood. As you can see, it's a little bright out. That has like turned the viewer in, right? Like as a thing is happening. So that feels like
Smile.
Yeah, maybe like who did you screw over in the past that may turn you in next? I love this piece of art. I just wanted to talk about it before it got posted while we were talking about something else. But like what if you find that the person that you have been like trusting for all of this time, like somebody finally tells you like, oh, you've been talking to Shelley, like, don't you know that the last like 3 groups that they've been in have all been taken, right? Like, and just nobody gave you the gossip or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Which, you know, it's an interesting decision point for a coterie too. If they were the ones with the knowledge of a turncoat or something like that, do they allow that turncoat to, I don't know, betray the prince and the prince's council and take down all of the elders and the older gens in the area so that they can then step up and fill that power vacuum? Or do they ingratiate themselves with the current leadership by saying, no, we need to take care of this?
Mm-hmm.
It provides some really cool decision points, whether to have that knowledge and to not what to do with it.
Yes. Yeah. That's, now we're back to political intrigue, but just with more guns if you mess it up, I suppose.
Yeah,
Things. So I think we can talk more about what the previous question was asking about, like building that tension, and the response algorithm and whatnot. Like what are some, I think that's kind of what we've been talking around, but like just very specifically, like the Second Inquisition book does give you those, like that a big chapter about like how does the Second Inquisition step it up over time.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest problems, as a storyteller trying to, well, plan anything, let's be honest here, is that scaling is very difficult, especially if you're dealing with neonates or something like that, where they are just finding their sea legs, as it were, and figuring out how to be a vampire. You can start off with these little breadcrumbs of threats, and if they aren't addressed, well, here's what it turns into. Oh, you still haven't looked at that. Okay, great. Well, here's what it is now. 3 months down the road, you've let this problem boil over.
Yeah.
There are step-by-step instructions as far as how to implement the NSA and the Society of Leopold into your existing chronicles, which is fabulous, because especially with existing military organizations, I don't know anything about the NSA, you guys. I know they're probably watching me right now. I know I'm probably on a couple of lists, but that's really,
you Googled some weird stuff.
Knowledge.
It's not your fault. It's when you're working on anything like this. Yeah, no, my wife looked at my Google history recently and was like, what were you doing? And I was like, it's a vampire thing.
I was writing, alone. Don't worry about it. Shout out to Ted, my NSA agent, who I'm sure is watching this right now.
Like, just like being able to keep that kind of like, side list of, as the coterie is going on their late night mall montage or whatever, like what is the Second Inquisition or the Coalition,
what are they doing right now?
Doing it right, yeah, and like
how are they monitoring you?
Yes, or they aren't yet. Like they're over in across town dealing with this situation, and then like depending on what the players are doing or whatnot, like maybe they spring something, or maybe they get to hear something just because they end up in the right place at the right time. But it for me, as somebody who is not super big picture, like knowing that there is a system that I can keep over here and kind of check in on from time to time, and that there are steps, like take some of that pressure off of me for having to like design that all myself. Oh my God. Because when it is something that big, that's really intimidating to me, as a little storyteller baby. So
I mean, you are dealing with like a fully functioning city environment. One of the things that, just as a general note for storytellers trying to implement all of these different things and factions and all of this new stuff, I've started making myself timelines, actually literally drawing out what is happening when, because in all likelihood, two threats are going to present themselves at the same time, the way that I write, at least. So, that way you still have a visual representation of what is concurrently happening. it's helped me a lot, and I feel like that's exactly what you all had in mind when you were laying out these steps for the Second Inquisition. Like, okay, here are the developments as they occur.
Yes. Yeah, the development team was like built these very cool things, and also like building kind of systems that don't rely on like shock and awe violence. Like one of the examples is like the gentrifier.
Which
So
is my favorite.
yes. So like the purpose of the gentrifier for the coalition is to come into a place and make it inhospitable for vampires. Like they don't like they could not even know who the players are or who's around or anything like that.
It's
Their goal is just to,
HGTV.
yeah. It's like anti-vampire architecture. Um so it's not like before you know it or whatever, like the block has changed around you and now it doesn't feel safe anymore.
There are security cameras now. There's a doorman. Like, there are skylights in every building. Who did this? And you know, you're forcing the hand of the kindred who inhabit that area, because if they don't have the ability to just move one neighborhood over because of, I don't know, a Sabbat pack or something along those lines, another threat, or maybe there's just no space. If they can't just move over, maybe they're hiding out in the basement, and maybe they haven't fed because they can't, and maybe they go into a frenzy and brutally feed in an elevator, and it's all recorded. The gentrifier is very much like, well, I didn't make you do anything. You did that on your own. And it's such a petty move, and I love it.
Yeah, like you get that slip under your door that says like the landlord has sold the building or whatnot, right? And like maybe your world of darkness city in the world of darkness doesn't have rent control. And your resources are not at the dots required for this condo overhaul.
Or your
And
credit's not good enough. That new social security
yes.
number you got, the credit's not good enough that you can continue this lease. Where are you going to go?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah, just like introducing those very first world, or like, excuse me, real world problems into the group where they've been like dealing with the beast and like political or whatever, and now it's just like water bill
the
like
handyman has to come in and do some upgrades in the kitchen.
during the day.
Yeah, during the day, and you have to be there.
Mm-hmm.
What are you gonna do? It's beautiful and simple.
In the chat, you obviously ghoul a human who does have a good social security number. That's how you
there we go. All right, you got me there.
Can we get another
Craig,
piece
I
of
feel
art?
like that comes from experience.
Yeah,
that, like, you came up with that really fast.
Let me see. I'm checking back on my notes real quick. We talked about a whole bunch of these things just naturally.
We
I
did.
love
We
that.
sort of exploded with information and excitement.
That is great. So just with this piece of art in the background, I really like how, like, now that we've got Hunter previewed and with some of the like more down home almost said free range hunters that can get introduced, like cage free hunters. I like, give them somebody that's more bumbling or more simple, right? Where you can tell that they don't have all of these resources. It's two guys with an Impala and a shotgun. That are coming after, like, if I'm making the references, obviously I'm a fan, right? That they can take out so easily that it's not even a problem, right? Like, dump their bodies in a creek is fine. And then like there's no link that it's Second Inquisition, so they have that kind of security. here, how do you complicate things for a group of nomadic gangrel types? So everything I just said real quick, but it turns out that actually they like the hunters didn't even know that they were the ones being watched, right? Like they didn't have that level of oversight, but that is what finally trips that thing that then starts the whole timeline and execution.
Well, the other piece of that though is that if you like, let's say you are one of those two guys with the Impala and you're monster hunting, but you aren't a monster, so you don't know that who you're watching is actually the local Sabbat pack, but who you've been watching is actually the Toreador Primogen of the area. Like, it's because you don't have the knowledge, like the hunters might not have the knowledge of the area or kindred society enough to not really screw things up inadvertently before they're just kind of knocked off. Just so many dominoes that you can set up to be knocked over. And there's always the possibility that, yeah, you know, you can take out those two guys and destroy the Impala, but who's to say that they weren't being watched by the hunters for other reasons, or by the Second Inquisition for other reasons?
Yes.
Society of Leopold's going to want to know who's out there and who's doing work in the elimination of the supernatural. Yeah. So you might not be getting watched while you're taking out those two guys, but maybe they were. And now you are. It's good. I'm just so happy these books exist. Yeah. I'm just so happy.
Yeah, like as I'm flipping through them, it's like, gosh, I sure hope nothing bad happens to that nice coterie, just over and over and over again. And so,
news for you.
Yeah, everything bad always happens to that nice coterie. I'm checking my clock real quick, and I just want to make sure that we get to a few more of the cool things in here before we just talk about social engineering the whole time. Can we get the next picture, please? Because I want to talk about special equipment and like cool gadgets and weapons and whatnot. Is there anything, Deanna, that jumped out to you that sounds interesting as far as gizmos and gadgets?
I loved the artifacts. Some of those were just really cool. I think my personal favorite was the Abyssinian heart. Basically, it's a mummified heart inscribed with medieval texts that begins beating when a vampire crosses the threshold to a dwelling. So, telltale heart. Mm-hmm. Like immediately, you get good vibes from that. And it kind of interacts with some of the traditional folklore about vampire and thresholds, some of those folkloric banes that you can still take. You know, and it has some pretty devastating effects on the kindred themselves. It's just beautifully done and implies a level of monstrosity on the part of mortals in this case that just, I mean, it's the desiccation of a corpse. You are taking a heart and writing on it and putting it in your floor.
Yeah.
That in and of itself makes the Second Inquisition far more terrifying than something that's going to drink my blood to me. I just, you know, personal opinion.
Yeah, like who was the type of human that would, or mortal that would have that
do
thing? That is like secondary storytelling or environmental storytelling for like so many other things. Like they had to have been cool with so many things and had the knowledge of so many things to make that object in that place at that time.
And you know, it started with trial and error too. You
it's
know,
not a hand-me-down.
How many corpses did they go through before they found the right heart with the right text? Like, that just, it's so terrifying to me as a concept. I really liked the one that you had picked out though.
Yeah, so the one that I picked out is the basal ganglia masking agent. And so that is you can put it in a grenade, you can, you know, put it in an aspergillium, what have you. And
you can do a magic trick, just
yeah, and it blocks a vampire's ability to like shapeshift. like the basal ganglia is what gives, like, makes them, sort of rage out and get claws, get their fangs, whatever, what have you. And so, like, maybe the Inquisition or Coalition or whatever knows that there's a bunch of, like, protean or gangrel and whatnot type vampires, and they bomb that first. And now nobody can do their cool things.
Can you imagine being an eternal being? You're 500 years old. You've been walking the earth in your unlife, and you have addressed every problem you have ever faced in your unlife as a bear. Okay, you just, the tax man comes around, you change into a bear and scare him off. Like, that's how you have addressed everything so far. And then suddenly these agents are bursting into your haven, and you're like, all right, here we go.
Bear time.
And nothing happens.
Who am I if I am not the bear?
And you're like, I'm the gangrel primogen. This can't happen to me. How am I going to get... Everyone's going to be talking about this.
Well, yeah, and then that, even, like, you don't even have to have a scene with it with the players. Like, but, like, to overhear that whisper of, like, so-and-so got away, and, like, Jeremy couldn't even be a bear, to say that in a humorous way, but like, being able to bring up that fear that you talked about earlier of, like, that loss of control, where vampires feel like they're able to control a situation with a mortal through whatever means, like, but all of a sudden they couldn't, and nobody knew that could happen, and nobody knows why it happened. It can. New information. And with this piece of art, people brought up red gas. Yes, we now have some information on the red gas. So be sure to bring that up at a cool cinematic time with your players. It'll be a fun cliffhanger. It would be for me.
I've already put like 6 post-it notes on that page, so don't worry about it. It's fine. Miami will be fine.
Yes, it doesn't hurt humans, I think. And if somebody's ready to pull that out, maybe they don't care if it does hurt humans. Which,
same
again,
dude who defiled a corpse.
Who's the real monster?
Yep.
Yes, if we can get one more, the final piece of art, I want to talk about like types of cities, is another thing that I really liked in the book, where it does describe how involved the coalition has become in a city, and, like, gives you some cool systems to work with there. Like, it gives you kind of a breakdown of, like, you get to decide how involved is it, and at what stage of being involved is the coalition. And it gives you a bunch of examples of how that can look and how that can increase. And, like, outside, just the coalition realizing that kindred and whatnot are there, like, how entrenched are they? Because it's fine to come in and just deal with the threat and then leave. But what if they decide that your city now gets to be a stronghold of the coalition?
I would one step further.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they don't eliminate the threat right away. Maybe they're looking at the robust kindred society in New York or LA with enough known factors that they feel like they could extrapolate additional information. So they're there and they're present and they're watching. And you don't know when they're going to take actual action.
Mm-hmm.
But they're there. They're always there.
Yeah.
And some of those old cities like Prague, like, look, there's a reason that I live in Utah, and it's because no one is here. So Second Inquisition can't find me. I am safe. But yeah, it's it's easy to add it into existing stuff too. And again, that's that scaling factor that you all have put so much work into this book to make easy to implicate.
Yeah, like I love how much of the tools in both Sabbat and Second Inquisition like break it down into nice little bite-sized chunks. For those of us who may have not been involved with vampire for a decade or more, and it makes it easy to onboard and to introduce it slowly. Like you don't also feel like you have to throw the entire book into your chronicle or whatnot to make it work. Like you can just introduce just that
Just a
tiniest little bit,
Yeah.
just like one power or
Which is
one situation.
which is helpful as an ST too, right? Like there's already so much to try and hold on to information wise. Being able to add a threat without fully developing the concept in the beginning is so valuable in terms of planning assets. Yes. So
yeah, like it does it's not the best feeling when you go and develop an entire huge thing, blah blah blah, and then your players just walk on by it to go do whatever other silly little thing they wanted to do. Mm-hmm. When you're like, no, look at my MacGuffin, it's right here. But instead you can just like sprinkle it in until they have no choice but to face it. Like it's too late that you didn't miss it because it's been going on without you this whole time. Mm-hmm. And just peeking at the chat real quick. So yes, we are doing a Miami source. Welcome source. To Miami. Gosh darn it. That's exactly where my brain went to. So we are doing a Miami source book. We will have more information about that later, but there is one coming this year. And it is not the starter set. That is a different thing. Starter set is going to be a way to introduce new players and new storytellers in a way that doesn't require reading a 432 page book.
Yeah, there isn't as much internal screaming that way.
Yes. So, and I don't want to get too into those because we are just about at the end of our time. So I'm checking to see if there were any other questions. But yeah, so a Miami source book that is going to be developed and released by Renegade. So I am very excited that people are excited about that. And I hope that this has been fun for you all talking about Second Inquisition and Sabbat and seeing some of this art. So Second Inquisition is on its way. That was one of the last ones that got printed overseas. So it has been a journey on a slow boat over to the American continent. So I hope that we will have it soon. Oh, when is Nightlife Season 2 premiering? Do you know if we're allowed to say? Did we already say that?
We haven't quite confirmed the date. Like we're 99% of the way to confirming the drop date, but early-ish summer.
Soon, TM. Yes.
I'll be screaming about it online when we finally have an announcement. So just make sure you're following me on Twitter and you'll know, I promise, because I won't shut up about it.
And if there's anything else that you wanted to hear about, be sure to check out the panel that Elisa did with Justin yesterday. So that should be up on YouTube and everything. So if there's any books or anything you want to hear about, they did talk about them there as well. So I will be signing off here, but I want to encourage you all, please join our Facebook groups and our Discord. We have people in there all the time. Go check out season 1 of The Nightlife if you haven't. It's all up and available, and you can go and see why other folks are so excited about a Miami source book. And also thank you so much for being with us at Renegade Con. It has been so exciting to finally share everything that's happening 2022 with all of you all, because we've been keeping it secret. So check out our web store if you want to pick up any pre-orders for any books. There's a pre-order bonus of a free PDF for a lot of our games. Some of them come with with special promos and everything. So check them out. Make sure you don't miss them. Talk to your local game store. If you prefer to pick things up in person, they might have a deal with us where you are able to get them too. And we will see you around. Thank you so much.
Can we just give trivia a quick round of applause? This is panel number 5 for you today.
Yes.
Panel number 5.
I have tried to keep my energy up, and I hope you all enjoy. It's great to round it out with Vampire because we just get to talk about like cool social stuff. So it's a great
you
final
and I get real
panel.
stupid about Vampire.
Yeah. I just hope nothing bad happens to this nice bunch of kindred. And oh yes, and if you haven't heard, the preview for Hunter dropped yesterday, so you need to go find that over on the Paradox website. But you should go check it out too.
It's a masterpiece. It's so beautiful. It's amazing.
Thank you all so much for being here and being active in chat and asking us questions. And I can't wait for you to tell me what has happened to your nice coterie as a result of these 2 books. So have a great night, and thank you. Renegade Con Winter 2020 is complete. Goodbye.
We did it.